If you're applying to medical school, it's likely that you're going to have to write a secondary essay, possibly several secondary essays. So I wanted to give you a common secondary essay prompt and give you some ways of thinking through how you might want to respond to it. First, hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Klebe, and I'm an admissions expert at BeMo. So the secondary essay prompt that I have for you today is this. Briefly describe a situation where you were not in the majority. What did you learn from this experience? So, a really interesting prompt, one that might take you a little while to think through and reflect on. Maybe something like this has happened and it doesn't stick out immediately in your mind. You might have to do some self-reflection and some really detailed thinking through your own personal history to isolate an issue like this. Or on the other hand, there's usually like one of two extremes in answering a question like this, or maybe you've had an experience that really stands out in your mind, something that was maybe a formative experience for you, or even something that maybe doesn't stand out for you in a positive way. Being in a situation where you're not in the majority, that can sometimes be a really tense situation. And so that points towards the first little bit of advice that I have in thinking through how to respond to this question. Potentially at the heart of this question, depending on what the experience was, this seems to me like it could be a question about conflict resolution. Right? When we're talking about situations where we're not in a majority, at least for me, the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is a debate of some kind, or a situation in which you were maybe expressing an opinion that wasn't held by the majority of people around you, or maybe even an unpopular opinion. And so this gives you the opportunity to demonstrate some really great things about yourself, either in discussing the experience itself, depending on how it went, or in your reflection on that experience now, later, looking back in retrospect. So let's say one of the more common, I think, things that might come to mind is a situation where maybe you were standing up for your own values or your own position in a context that wasn't maybe necessarily favorable or amenable towards that particular position. So I think many of us have been in a situation where we were having maybe a heated debate with others and found that our perspective or even our own life experience wasn't something shared by those around us. And that can cause some tension, some friction. Especially if this was sort of a really negative situation where you're in kind of an adversarial context. These kinds of things can get quite heated. So that wouldn't be the focus of a response to a question like this. You would want to take some time to detail the situation itself, give a general summary, paint that sort of picture in your reader's head of you in this situation by using well-developed narrative, prose, maybe even constructing a vignette, which is to say, literally telling the story of what happened, giving detail. Writing as if you were writing for something more like creative nonfiction or something like that, where you're expressing your own internal responses, your feelings, the things that were said, how they were said, etc. Putting that reader in a place where they can really imagine you in that scenario. So you'd want to do that and establish that sort of groundwork. How much detail you go into is going to depend on how much space you have. The prompt that I'm drawing this from gives 500 words. So it's a decent chunk, but it's not a huge essay. So you wouldn't want to spend a ton of time on that, but you do need to set the stage. And then, explain what was at stake in the situation. If you're not in the majority, again, was this an adversarial situation? Was it a structured debate for something like school, like an actual debate? Or was it a more informal discussion among classmates, colleagues, family, friends, or among strangers? lay this out and let them know sort of what the stakes were, why you were representing a position or yourself as something or someone not in the majority. But you're going to want to focus most on that second part of the prompt. What did you learn from this experience? And that's the case with many of these types of questions. Again, a question about a situation where you're not in a majority is often going to be one of those sort of negative questions, right? Things that or similar questions are questions about times you failed, limitations you've had, things that you've had to overcome, etc., where you're reflecting on maybe less than ideal circumstances, but the purpose of that is to discuss the transformative component of the experience itself by looking back on it now at a distance and reflecting on what you learned from it. So being in a situation where you're not a majority or maybe not representing a majority opinion, it can be a disconcerting situation, right? Again, especially if it's a situation where you're representing values, core beliefs, things about who you are, your identity, and how you see the world. So in that potential tension or friction, what did you learn? What did you learn about others? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about communicating effectively with people who maybe see the world differently than you or who see you differently than you see yourself? Even if the situation didn't have a positive resolution, you likely still learned a lot about it, right? And or about yourself, about others, about all of those things that I just mentioned. Sometimes the lesson is that we're not always going to agree on everything, and we need to find productive ways to try to move forward despite that lack of agreement. Sometimes the lesson that we learn is something about ourselves that maybe sometimes I know sometimes I will come off in arguments maybe quite differently than I hope that I would, or that's been something that I've struggled with in the past, and certainly in situations where I was having a heated debate about values and things like that. And the ability to learn about myself in that way and reflect on how I represent myself and how others see me, even if I have the best of intentions, that helps me understand, number one, again, a lot about myself and helps me think through how I present myself in different situations. But it also teaches me a lot about others, which is to say, an example would be a lot of times we hope that our audience or those with whom we are conversing in, say, a heated debate or something like that, we want to believe that they're going to take our arguments in good faith, that they're going to give us the benefit of the doubt, that they're going to always try to read us in the best light or read us the way that we want to be read. And a big lesson is that that's not always the case, as sad as it might be. Now, if I were reflecting on this in an essay, I wouldn't want to stop there. That wouldn't want to be my end point. What I'd want to think about is ways that I could be more proactive in ensuring that I construct the context for that kind of receptive audience or conversational partner, and also using it as a lesson for myself. If I've been in a situation where I feel that I haven't been read fairly, or where I haven't been given the benefit of the doubt, or where the best intentions weren't assumed of me, well, one of the best things that I can do is evaluate myself and see if I've done that to other people. Think about ways that other people have left me feeling sort of frustrated by that conversation, and ensuring that I don't replicate those conditions in conversation with someone else. So, thinking about how we want to be read or heard often gives us good material for reflecting on how we should be listening to or reading others as well. And so taking something that, again, could potentially be a rather negative situation, but turning it around and thinking about how I can let that drive me to be a better person, to try to be the kind of person that I want others to be with me, that is a great lesson to take away from a potentially tense situation. So, those are some ideas on how to think about and reflect through this. Again, the purpose is almost always that second part. What did you learn from this experience? What values can you take with you? In what ways are you better now for having gone through it, especially if it was something negative? So I hope that this is helpful and that you enjoyed this video. If so, please do go ahead, like it, share it with a friend who might benefit from it, and be sure to follow us on whatever social media platform you're viewing this on right now. If you'd like us to help you, click the link that should appear either above or below this video to see our programs and schedule your free initial consultation. We'll set you up with one of our admissions experts to answer any questions you might have and get you started with your preparations. We have programs to suit any of your needs, and we're always happy to work with you to determine which program is going to suit you and your goals most effectively. As ever, thank you so very much for your time. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.